Danganronpa Togami, Volume 1, Chapter 2, Eve Burst Era. Part 1. McDonald's, convenience store food, cup noodles, Domino's, KFC, cup noodles, McDonald's, Domino's, convenience store food. If I told you that was my weekly meal plan, would it send a chill down your spine? Part 2. Fast food isn't a blight that only arrived with the modern era. For someone like me, that fact alone saved me. In ancient Rome, there were no kitchens in apartments, but you could buy ready-made meals. In 13th century Paris, there were already stores that sold cooked meals and cakes. In the Edo period, food stalls flourished. The benefits of home-cooked meals? The camaraderie that's formed around the dining table? Those are downright lies. I grab some leftover McFries, browse the net, make sure everyone else still has a talent except for me, feel tired, and then go to sleep. I wasn't really sure anymore why I kept on living like a mole, but what I did know for sure was what was to blame for it, and that was goddamn hope. I was crushed by hope, and so I lived in a world without hope. I didn't leave my room, and lived peacefully in a place where hope was nowhere to be seen. Hey, why are you laughing? You're really inexperienced, mister. When you laugh, even if it's forced, you can calm yourself down. Is that right? Why don't you try it out right now? Come on, let's do it together. What is this? It's delicious. Try some of this. It's so good. So why was I outside, connecting with someone over a meal like this? Part 3. With just a cursory search, you find the super high school level traditional Japanese dancer, the super high school level pet groomer, super high school level female bassist, super high school level bear hunter, super high school level candle maker, super high school level charcoal burner. Plenty of talents pop up. It almost makes me want to declare talent in itself to be completely worthless. Long story short, I was stuck before I even started. I had been out of school for a while now, a mole sleeping all alone. As long as I had some carbs and some net access with me there in the dirt, I wouldn't die, but I felt I may as well be dead the way I lived. That day was the same as any other. I nabbed some cold potato chips, doing some searches to see what those glittering talents were doing right that second. Some people live to expand their video game collection, and plenty of others get their kicks from their favourite baseball team winning. Those people's lives are directly connected to other people's lives. They snatch up the best parts of other people's lives in order to bring some colour to their own lives. Otherwise they wouldn't know what to do with their money, or with a ball, on their own. What I did wasn't probably too far off from what those dumbasses were doing. When I, the mole, got wind of talents popping up in the first bamboo shoots of spring, I couldn't stop myself from constantly reassuring myself. It's probably natural to have talent. They're not unique. I knew it wasn't productive. I wanted to go outside. But people with zero talent don't get to go outside. And what agonized me and pained me more than anything else was the fact that plenty of people with zero talent were living on the outside anyway. These people could be bathing in literal shit, and while they were drenched in the stuff, they'd all be, "Oh, the water's great," and leave it at that. And so I guess that counts as the outside for them. There were plenty of other people who mistakenly believed they belonged on the outside, even starting families and even having successful careers. I could never do something like that. I would never fall into the trap of self-satisfaction, and I wouldn't become some evangelist preaching fire and brimstone either. I wasn't going to be a part of any mummy and daddy team protecting their fragile paper-mache household, and I wouldn't be some cackling corporate manager. So what would I do? That question haunted me the most. I never thought it would turn out this way, and frankly I still can't quite believe it did. Because I believed that even if I had nothing else, I had to have talent. Not like running a 100-meter dash in 3-point-something seconds, or being able to tell what brand wine is just by looking at the colour or the levitation or any other special art or technique like that. For example, what about a talent for writing? I tried reading the novels published by the super high school level literary girl and the super high school level light novelist, but they were so shitty that I've got all worked up about it. Son of a bitch, why did they get to be the haves while I'm with the have-nots? Why did they get to live on the outside while I'm still a mole? Huh, you think I'm going on about this for too long? Maybe you're right. A little girl giving out life advice is annoying as shit, but a grown man like me talking to himself is the worst. I should just close my eyes, fall asleep. Dreams, go to hell. Hopes, go to hell. People who think hopes and dreams come true, go to that extra special level of hell. Good night. Part 4. Of course I noticed the disaster. Anyone would notice if they had been fast asleep and then woken by the sound of an explosion. At first I thought the despair disease had already made it out here to the boonies, but when I opened the curtain and looked outside, I got a different impression. I'd seen videos on the underground file sharing sites of a certain country where over half the citizens had come down with this despair disease. They looked like they were having fun. It was like stacking despair onto despair made it a double negative, and so they'd become happy instead. Guffawing with the boisterous laughter, they killed each other with smiles on their faces. Whether they were beating someone or being beaten, stabbing someone or being stabbed, they laughed their way through with a blissful assault. So since everyone was an assailant, that would mean that no one was a victim. But here and now, I could hear the screams from outside my apartment building. Of course it had woken me up too. But after I checked to make sure my door was locked, there was basically nothing else I could do. I had a headache, maybe from all the anxiety or something. I went back to my room and washed my hands and tried to turn on the TV, but there was no signal. The internet connection had been cut too. What about phones? There wasn't anyone for me to call, or anyone who would call me, so I called the weather forecast number instead, feeling strangely awkward. The line was down. The screams outside were clearly growing in number. I checked my stockpile of cup noodles and then wandered aimlessly around the room like a tiger in a zoo before finally going back to hiding in my bed. There's a term in psychology called normalcy bias. It's a system where even when someone sees accidents and disasters in front of their very eyes, and then even when their own life is in danger, they cling to what's familiar and ordinary, thinking, well, it's fine, I probably won't die. A system where they take themselves out of their own stories, avoiding the death right in front of them. The terrible thing is, even knowing about that, I couldn't make myself get out of bed. I stayed there for about an hour. During all that time, all the noises stopped. I couldn't hear anything except for the wind. Silence. It was beautiful. Just beautiful how the silence spread out eerily over everything. It was so peaceful it felt like the world had only just been born. I tried getting out of bed. The listlessness in my body, the hard keratin on my feet, and the feeling in my stomach of only ever being about 60% full were all the same as they had always been. And yet, it felt different somehow, as if everything had been refreshed. It took almost a full minute for me to realize why. Oh, I get it. It was the world that changed, not me. All the common sense I'd had up until yesterday was thrown out the window now. I could do whatever I wanted. Wait, hold on. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to get carried away. Only cowards rejoice at the end of the world. If I waited expectantly for the end to come, I'd be no different from a cultist. I may have been a mole, and even a coward, but I hadn't fallen far enough to cling to some god fresh out of the imagination oven. So what would I do? Nothing really. I could just keep going on as I always had. If I was still the same, I'd feel my grudge against talent. Start like I always did. Start in the negatives. I'd do just a quick confirmation of the situation first. For the first time in a long time, I headed out for something other than food. Part 5. For some reason, I thought everything would be all messed up outside. Mountains of rubble, bodies tumbling everywhere, the pungent smell of death. That's what I was expecting to see, but I was pleasantly surprised to see my expectations betrayed. The convenience store, the residential district that I could see from my apartment window, The charming telephone poles, the mountains surrounding the town, none of them looked any different. The gloomy town looked the same as ever. As long as you just ignored the part that there were no people to be seen anywhere. I wanted to try out calling, "Is anyone there?" But I'd be pretty embarrassed if anyone was there, and get anxious if there really wasn't anyone. So I just walked in silence instead. The lights were on in the convenience store, and there was evidence that the McDonald's had been open for business just a little while ago. The houses didn't seem any different, and there were cars with their engines still running, sitting in the road. Humans were the only thing missing. Upon travelling to a certain Eskimo village, it was found out that there were no people in it. They were half-eaten meals in the huts, and there were seal pelts used to make the coats they had been left behind. To this very day, it is not known where the villagers went and why they disappeared. I suddenly remembered a mysterious story of the bazaar I'd read when I was little. I didn't think it would happen quite like this. I had stereotypical images of the end days, with people dying left and right, the town demolished into rubble and stuff like that. But what I got instead was just surreal. I'm not a fan of surrealism, and the meaning of it completely goes over my head. So all I was getting out of this was a stomachache from the sharp spike of stress. I felt like I was going to throw up bits of hamburger and potato chips. The people were gone, but the town looked the same as ever, and that sense of immutability made me feel more discomforted than the opposite. Without realizing it, I had started running. I ran around until I got tired, and when I snapped back to attention, I had come out onto a major street. My out-of-shape body screamed in pain, legs cramping up. I collapsed on the spot, unable to bear it. No matter how much I rubbed at them, my legs wouldn't come back to normal. I regretted not stretching before running. No, I had already well established that stretching wouldn't have any effect. I was nothing more than a hunk of junk. Pitiful. Here I was, the guy who was in the middle of the strangest event ever in history, and I was crying over my legs cramping up. Absolutely pitiful. Ah! And then I became the guy who was getting beat up by someone else. Some kind of huge travel bag or something hit me in the face. I tumbled onto the ground. My whole face went numb, losing most sensation. My vision was unsteady too, and when I tried touching the tip of my nose, I found it was covered in blood. Fucking hell, I fucking knew it. That's just the role I get to play. The world had changed, but not in my place in it. I had no talent after all, I was just some background character. Filled with pain, anger, and some other feeling I couldn't quite understand, I raised my head, and something appeared in my shaky field of vision. The person lugging the huge travel bag was slowly approaching. Clunk, clunk, clunk. The sound of something heavy being dragged moved right up next to me. In a barely conscious rage, I used the leg I could move more freely and kicked. Came a strange scream as the stranger was blown away. Huh? That was a surprise. My kick had actually connected. And what's more, it had connected with a pretty girl. Part 6. Why are you staring at me so much? Sorry. I might think you're inexperienced if you apologize like that for it. I don't mind, I'm just used to people looking at me. No, I'm sorry for kicking you. Oh, you really are inexperienced. I was the one who attacked you, so you don't have to take any responsibility for that. I'm not going to sue you or anything. Well, that's a relief. I'm also relieved. After all, I finally discovered my first villager. This part bears repeating. She was a pretty girl. Her bangs were beautifully arranged. Her limbs were long and slender. Her large eyes were slanted ever so slightly. Her laugh was gorgeous. It felt like she was an elegant trickster cat that had been given human form. It may have been improper for me to think that way when she looked like she was at least a decade younger than me, but I felt a fluttering in my chest nevertheless. In your face. Not really in the face of anyone in particular, though. You can call me Satomi Aoba. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, first villager-san. The pretty girl bowed at a pleasing angle as she introduced herself. Just as the name Aoba means green leaves, her long hair swayed like the fresh new leaves. This isn't a village, it's a town, I corrected pointlessly. What did you come to this town for? I'm on a trip to mend my broken heart. The girl named Alba had a refined hairstyle and fashion sense. The carry-on bag she'd injured me with seemed pretty heavy, so it was true that she looked like she was a tourist from out of town. But about the only thing in this town that had going for it was that it was the birthplace of a famous pianist, and there wasn't really anything else to see, except enough nature sprawling around that anyone would get sick of it. Maybe she was just here on her way to a different sightseeing area. Actually, hold on, even someone this pretty can end up with a broken heart? I had a thought that the outside was pretty scary. Incidentally, what happened to this town? No one is around. Aoba asked, smiling like a TV announcer. No, actually, I don't really know either. You don't know? I was asleep. Oh my, is that so? I mean, I was tired. It was basically the stupidest response, but it had been a while since I'd had a real conversation with anyone, and given that I was talking to a pretty girl, it couldn't be helped. I'd like it if you thought of it that way. However, suddenly started laughing. I understand completely. Understand what? You're inexperienced. What am I inexperienced about? You're inexperienced in life. Huh? It doesn't appear to me that you're very skilled at living your own life. It'll be difficult for you to shake off the label of inexperienced unless you have a certain amount of successful personal experiences. I didn't say anything. It's just like the horizontal bar or the guitar. If you stumble on the first step, you won't be able to do a back hip circle or an arpeggio. You're being pretty harsh on someone you're meeting for the first time. Should I not be? I can understand how seeing me would make you want to start preaching, but before all that, I want you to tell me what happened. I was honestly asleep. Isn't all this Byakuya Togami's doing? Part 7. It almost goes without saying that I was surprised to hear that name coming out of Aoba's mouth. At a time like this, Byakuya Togami was famous, but he wasn't the type of person that would be well known among young girls, and it wasn't a name that would usually come up in this context. Don't tell me you don't know about the World Domination Proclamation. I may have been bewildered, but Aoba looked even more bewildered than I felt, tilting her head. But I was at a loss, even when she reacted that way. I didn't know of any World Domination Proclamation. I'd never heard of such a stupid proclamation. So, you know, when I heard everything, I was kinda, how should I put it, exhausted. Byakuya Togami made a proclamation of world domination in Prague? If in 24 hours nobody kills him or finds the pitiful cattle, what does that even mean? He's gonna take over the world? In order to prove that his proclamation is the real deal, he crashed a satellite into the island in the Mediterranean? Is this a joke? Actually, why Prague? Did he use his private jet? I felt offended. That fucker's probably never even used a wallet stuffed full of point cards. Byakuya Togami is an insufferable prick, I said. He's a super high school level heir. He's blonde and blue-eyed despite being Japanese. He calls himself super high school level perfection. He's earned about 40 billion yen through the day trading. He's short-tempered, 4 eyes. Is he an acquaintance of yours? As if. You're very knowledgeable for someone who doesn't know him personally. Knowledgeable, huh? Of course I am. My beloved hope. My detested hope. I always wanted to enroll at Hope's Peak Academy, after all. Oh my! Alba raised her voice. I have a friend who goes to Hope's Peak Academy. You do? What talent do you have, mister? I tried to think of which word it was that hurt me in that question, but, well, it was probably both of them. I didn't have any talent, but I had a dream. When a boy sees a major league game, and that faint dream flickers away in his mind, I want to be in the MLB. Or when a girl stumbles across a flower shop and the smell dream sprouts, I want to be a florist. Basically, nobody makes the cold judgment that they have no talent for it, and casts their dream aside. I had a dream. I'd read Seiichi Kirima, Hiroto Shimabe, Kojo Sugita, Tatsumi Sekiguchi, Kyosaku Umeno, Kilgore Trout, and Derek Hartfeld. And I had a dream. The only thing I was missing was a talent. But who cares about that anymore? We exchanged information. When Byakuya Togami made the World Domination Proclamation in Prague, I was in my apartment escaping reality through sleep, and it was probably around then that the town changed to have no people in it. And Aoba showed up after everything was already over. That seemed to be the progression of events. This raised 3 questions right off the bat. Question 1. Why would somebody attack in the middle of nowhere? If you were striking to take your first step towards world domination, there were way more appropriate towns to pick. Why not Sapporo or New York or Bologna or Anshin? Why target here? Question 2. Why did the townspeople disappear? If you were trying to demonstrate your power and instill fear, murder would be the most effective strategy. I think making them all disappear kind of misses the point of that a little. Or was there some kind of reason for that? Question 3. Why did you hit me? Oh, I couldn't tell if you were one of the townspeople or not, so I decided to have you lose the will to fight first, mister, before hearing what you had to say. What kind of plan is that? You like a soldier or something? What, do soldiers do such dreadful things? I don't know, but clunk, clunk, clunk. With the carry-on bag she'd used to attack me dragging behind her, Aoba was heading off somewhere. Wait, sorry, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. Huh? When did I imply you hurt my feelings? Aoba turned around. Apologizing immediately is the mark of someone inexperienced. If you waste your time with feelings of guilt, it's your loss. Sorry. In the end, I couldn't think of anything else to do but apologize. Hey, please wait. Where are you going? I'm going to check. Check? I'm going to check to see where the townspeople disappeared to. Do you have an idea? I'm not sure I'd call it an idea when it's the only place for them to be. I don't know, where? In their houses. Part 8. Where does a wise man hide a leaf? In the forest? This had nothing to do with trees, but it was a more simple and efficient explanation to say that the townspeople went into their own homes, as opposed to being spirited away en masse. But why weren't they coming out of their homes? What was the situation such that they couldn't come out? Unpleasant notions kept filling my brain, so I decided to stop using my brain and start using my body. We laid eyes on a house. It had a large garden and a red roof. The lights weren't on. Aoba pressed the button for the intercom. No response. Again? No response. She tried to turn the doorknob, but in a development that probably should have been obvious, the door was locked. Hey, let's give up, I said nervously. If the door is locked, there's nothing we can... Step back! Aoba lifted her carry-on bag and flung it towards a window. The noise was about 7 times louder than I was expecting, echoing through the empty town. Now I can get in! Aoba pulled along her bag, which now had glass shards stuck to it, entering the living room. I couldn't turn back now. I followed her in. I turned on the lights and started investigating the first floor. I tried opening doors one after the other, but I didn't find anything disastrous or out of the ordinary. It was just a regular old house with regular old furniture in it. There was just the bedroom left. Aoba was already standing in front of it, turning the doorknob. But before I could say anything, the door opened. There was a middle school student, or maybe a high school student. Well, it didn't really matter. He was dead after all, crucified against the wall. Scissors were stabbed deep into both of his hands to hold up his slender body. There were several more stuck into his abdomen too, with one or possibly all of them likely being responsible for the fatal wound. A large amount of blood was seeping out from that area. Bloodstain fever. That was what was written next to the crucified corpse, in what was probably the victim's own blood. We rushed out of the house. The town was shrouded in silence, as if the tragedy we'd just witnessed with our own eyes had never existed at all. Since there was no wind, the clouds hung still in the air. Since there were no people, there was no sound, and with all of the house's doors closed, it seemed like a spectacularly well done miniature replica. There were two choices left. To look or not to look. Let's take a look. Thought so. I knew Albert was going to say that, but I still felt a wave of nausea. There was no point in either resolve or resignation. After a brief discussion, we decided to aim for a house down a side street, suggesting that moving to a different residential area would be the probability of finding a survivor. Was thoroughly optimistic outlook to take, but we couldn't possibly perform a check like this without some hope to sustain us. Just like last time, we smashed through a window, and just like last time, we trespassed through the living room, but this time, the corpse was in the bathroom. There was a middle school student, maybe a high school student. Well, it didn't really matter. She was dead, after all. Immersed in the bathtub, her neck had been pierced through with a knife. It was stabbed in deep enough that no one could say it had been a conservative or gentle affair. There was a suspicious glint from the other end of it in the dim bathtub. The corpse's clothes were so blood-stained that I couldn't tell what colour they originally were. Again, we rushed out of the house, and before I knew it, we were standing back on the street where we had first met. How much time had passed, I wonder? How long did we stay dazed in silence? We just stood there, looking at each other, gasping for breath. Finally, Auerba said, The first corpse was by Genocider Show, wasn't it? Then the second, wouldn't that be Stabbin' Jack? Genocider Show, a serial killer menacing Japan, targeting young men in their teens and 20s. They use scissors to stab with a reckless abandon and then write blood-stained feather at the crime scene using the victim's own blood, like a dog marking its territory. Twisted, brutal, with a strangely trendy methodology, and the skill to evade leaving any evidence. People have gone so far as to call them an urban legend. Stabbin' Jack. This serial killer's speciality is young women. The chosen method of murder is simply a knife to the neck. To date, 77 girls have fallen victim. Elusive like a phantom, they're extremely unpopular with the PTA and human rights groups, but they're also responsible for skyrocketing viewership ratings and globally command long-standing TV shows, satire, and 3-minute Today Stabbin' Jack forecast programs. Both Genocider Show and Stabbin' Jack were serial killers representing Japan, their true identity shrouding in darkness. I've heard that naturally the police, and even the zero-class detectives registered with the detective library, have been unable to tangle the mysteries and crack the cases. There are rumors that investigation may or may not have been passed off to the JDC, the Japan Detectives Club. It may or may not have been passed off to the ER3 System Comprehensive Research Center. But it's probably a copycat killer, I added quickly, averting a number of issues with that theory. What were the chances? Coincidentally, 2 serial killers were in the same town and coincidentally killed someone at the same time. It would be completely absurd. Well, it was already pretty absurd to think about a serial killer copycat went wild in this town. But if Byakuya Togami got serious and planned that absurdity, it could happen. But why would he do that? World domination? Was he actually serious about that? If so, then I'm disappointed in you, Byakuya Togami. Why should anyone give a single shit about world domination? As soon as you get your hands on control of the world, you're just a glorified landlord. What the hell is fun about collecting rent or listening to people's complaints or renovations? Ruling the world isn't the same as just making the world turn to your talent. Byakuya Togami of all people should already know that. It was really bugging me that I didn't know the details of that world domination proclamation he threw out in Prague. Let's try looking in the other houses, mister. That was a veritable parade of depressing words. Desperate for any information, we continued with our tedious investigation. The result, we investigated 15 houses and found 15 corpses. One of them was in a wedding dress with the arms and legs cut off. One was pierced deeply through the chest with a Japanese sword, a dotanuki to be precise. One was drowned in a goldfish tank. One was frozen in a commercial refrigerator. One of them wrote a message in their own blood. Maybe I should just skip over the other 10. They were dismembered or missing their necks, or other weird stuff like that. The weirdest thing about it, that was that all 15 houses that we checked were locked. The front doors, of course, but they even locked things above the ceilings or the tiniest windows in the bathrooms too. They were locked rooms. But those weren't the only locked rooms. Birds died in cages and dogs died in dog houses, but the doors to the bird cages were wide shut and the doors to the dog houses were nearly boarded up. And I'll stop talking about this, but there were chains around a microwave with a dead baby inside, and an electric kettle that was duct taped shut with a dead kitten inside. Maybe it's safe to say that every living creature besides me and Aoba had been killed in locked rooms. Assuming that's the case. Part 9. The world's fucked. Hey guys, Dr. Medic here. Hope you enjoyed this reading of the first half of Chapter 2. So let's get into the Translators Notes. So in the section where the Mole Man is talking about authors he'd read, most of the authors are fictional authors, but Seiichi Kirima is from Boogie Pop Phantom, Hiruto Shimabe is from And Yet the Town Moves, Kojo Sugita is from the short story The Girl Watcher by Katai Tayama, Tatsumi Seguchi is from Morio no Hako, Kusako Yumeno is the pen name for Taido Sugiyama, who was a real author, so might be missing something is how he fits there. Kilgore Trout is a Kurt Vonnegut character, and Derek Hartfeld is from Hear the Wind Sing by Haruki Murakami. Stabbin' Jack is from, well, first of all, the way his this is just his sort of localized translated name, but his actual name is Suki Sashi Jack, and he's a character from Flicker Style, which is the debut novel of Yuya Sato. So the novelist writing this Danganronpa Togami novel series is Yuya Sato. So from the novel summaries, it seems the original novel had murders much like this one ascribed to Stabbin' Jack here in Danganronpa Togami. So it's a little bit of an insert character, I guess. There's a few insert characters from what I've heard, but that's kind of okay, I guess, since there's no real contradictions, really, or it's just a little nod to his previous works. I don't know how writing works, but I mean, I'm fine with it. The JDC, so the Japan Detectives Club, is from a novel series called the JDC series, written by Ryusui Serioin. And the ER3 system is from the Zarigato series by Ishin Nishio, which is actually a really fantastic mystery series. I highly recommend checking that out. One could say that Danganronpa is heavily inspired by Zarigato. So if you're a big fan of Danganronpa, definitely check out Zarigato. The 15 corpses were like the wedding dress corpse was from Subete ga F ni Naru. The Dotanuki is from, spoiler alert, volume 3 of Danganronpa Kirigiri. The goldfish tank is a Baika Horiutsu reference. And there's probably more references hidden there, but there's none that were found there. And the dying message could be like a reference to everything. People were speculating from things from like Death Note or even Sayaka's death in DR1, but like who knows at this point? I mean, DR1 hasn't happened yet. DRT is set before DR1.